The long-awaited Buddy Fight collab is finally here in English, and today we're going to talk about it. Specifically, the most recent, hype deck, Katana World Ninjas. The reason why this deck has been the topic of a lot of conversation lately is because this one was, to say underrated is a bit of an understatement on release in Japanese, but it has been putting up pretty consistent results in both English and Japanese. And we're going to be going through some lists today, so specifically the most recent Buddy Fight Cup top and the most recent WGP, as well as my own list I've been using, and we'll just talk about all the cards and explain it. This can be used basically as a way to learn the deck if you're someone wanting to play it, or it can be used as like you knowing what the deck does, so if you want to fight against it, this can be a helpful reference as well. That being said, this one's kind of scuffed, so this was sort of a last minute video. We were planning to just do like a fight of Katana World, but scheduling's really hard, and so the fight's gonna have to be a little delayed, so hopefully this will suffice in the meantime. But because it was so rushed, I don't have my mic or a proper setup today, so hopefully the quality is all okay and everything. But let's get into it. We're gonna be starting off with obviously the ride line / crests tokens buddy. This is pretty unanimous, like universally. Realistically, we only have one ride line we can play. So Shinobi Scrolls is made off of our grade 1. This is essentially like an advantage engine throughout the entire game. Basically, the way I've described this deck for people who do play Buddy Fight is it's like playing early Katana World, which is what it's based off of, but like you open well every time, because back in the day, this is what you wanted to open. Then obviously grade 2 gets either a Ninja or Ninja Arts is very useful, and the grade 3, which, let's just get this out of the way, is pretty solidly like you max out on Persona rides. So 1 ride deck and then 3 main deck and 1 Grad TS Grad Dale for the Persona ride. So Persona ride is really important in this deck because a lot of the time the numbers can be a bit lackluster without it, especially the first few swings. But apart from that, yeah, this grade 3 is nice. It essentially allows the deck to perform the way it does, even though it doesn't give power. So it's a bit of a trickier deck because you have to sort of take more into consideration. Something very important to note that I found with Zanya is that usually to avoid deck out, and you'll see throughout the rest of this video, I am horrified of deck out because it is a very real lose condition for this deck. But yeah, usually you won't be charge and drawing for turn because you don't need the gauge. You start building up gauge essentially after turn 3 usually is when you start building up a few gauge every turn. And if you manage your gauge correctly, in most cases you shouldn't need to charge and draw. You can just use the 3 gauge you get off Zanya and you'll be fine. Now with Buddy Fight specifically, our extra deck consists of a ride line. We have our crest, which is the Buddy Fight one. We have our token, and we also have our buddy. Tsukikage is pretty much the unanimous choice for buddy in this deck right now. There was a point in time a bit earlier on where a few topping lists were using Gojo Maru just to get better use out of the Buddy Fight OT, but Tsukikage's consistency is unmatched, and being able to guarantee one on turn 3 every game is just amazing. Tsukikage is a bit interesting as well because the one being your buddy guaranteed makes it so that main deck use of Tsukikage can feel a bit odd. So there are a few cards in this deck where I've seen lists that have done well that have a card that is at 0 in the main deck. There's same card that's at 1 main deck in the list top, one's 2 main deck, 1 and 3 is the main deck. So this is one of those cards. I have been feeling like 3 Tsukikage in main deck feels like a bit much. 1 feels a bit too sacky, like, oh, I'm just going to draw my 1 of before turn 3 every time. It's not really great feeling. So 2 feels sort of like a sweet spot for now, which is what the WGP list was using, 2 main deck Tsukikages. I've been playing with, well, actually, I wasn't even playing this one in my main deck for a while. I was playing with none in my main deck and just recycling this one over and over. I have it at 1 currently, but I guess we'll see by the time the fight comes out. Well, my list will change too, but I am feeling like 2 in main deck is pretty useful. The reason why we do want it in main deck is because on turn 2, it can help with your rush a lot, because obviously it's getting rid of itself to get you 2 other cards. So that's really easy rush. And then just thinning out more earlier, getting more consistency earlier, it's very useful. But it being a hard once per turn does mean that if you have too many, it gets clogged up and it's a bit hard to work around. So 1 to 2 main deck is sort of somewhere in the sweet spot. But speaking of the main deck, let's go on to that. Okay, so I already mentioned about the 3% rides and cup regardless piece. But here is our first, I guess, like attacker. 2 of it, because it's good, but it does suck in 2 bodies to make 1. So you are, I guess, like losing 2 cards to make 1 card from your hand. It's, yeah. That, along with the fact that it requires a CB to stand, and you usually don't want to be using more than 1 of these a turn, means that 2 of this is pretty unanimous. My list, WGP list, and the Buddy Cup list that recently topped all of them, we're all playing 2. This is the only natural soul guard in the deck, so rear guards are kind of vulnerable, besides this one obviously, but it does have 2 soul, when it, like at least 2 soul rather. So it's not bad, and it's also the only thing in the deck that gains power before your opponent is on grade 3, which is interesting because it makes a lot of things early game kind of, I guess, like defensive dependent. Like if your opponent checks a defensive or 2 defensives, your grade 3 turn going first is usually over. So this is important to have, but it's searchable and you never want to have more than 1. So 2 is pretty unanimous for this. An attacker that is played at more than 2 is Byakuya. So Gojumaru requires 1 Tsukage, 1 Byakuya to suck in. Usually you don't want to be sucking in this Byakuya, but this is your second attacker, or second main attacker, I guess, second rear guard attacker. It is an undeniable restand because no matter what, the condition for it to restand is your vanguard attacking. And so there's no counterblast, there's no anything that your opponent can do to deny that. Yeah, so I have it at 4, but both the WGP and Buddy Cup list had it at 3, which I think is fair enough. Like I said before, you're not really using this for Gojumaru, and so having it at 3 because you just need 1 on rear guard is, yeah, it's fair enough. There are some matchups though where you do want 2 on rear guard, specifically things like Prison, where your counterblast is already tight, and so having access to 5 attack without having to counterblast is really huge. Or just on turns where, you know, maybe you've only got 1 damage and you need to rebuild your board, so you rebuild it by using Zanya's skill, then you won't have the CB for Gojumaru necessarily. It has its uses. Now, the 2 things that these 2 cards that are your main attackers share is that 1, well, actually, slightly different wording, because this one works if your opponent, regardless of your opponent's grade, this one works only if your opponent is grade 3 or greater. They both get 5,000 power for the turn, so both of their restands will be essentially plus 10,000 power, both their first attacks is plus 5,000 power. And the other thing that they have in common is that they both stop your opponent from intercepting. So in theory, every attack that you do that's not from your vanguard should be unable to be intercepted, which sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't, but it's really, I guess, just nice to have. And there are a lot of decks now that are calling out like big shields in front row and stuff like that, so denying that is really nice. Now let's talk about a card I'm not running, Shiden. Shiden I don't have in my current list because in my initial testing, which was with proxies before the set was even out in Japanese, I had it at 1, and sometimes it was useful, but more often than not it led to me using me getting decked out or decking out in the games that I did use it. And so once we hit the official release, I cut it out completely. It is worth noting the other 2 lists we have today as reference are both playing Shiden, and the WGP one is playing him at 3, which is a very high number. Overall, I just think it's a bit of a weird card. He is searchable though, he's a ninja, so he's also salvageable from drop zone with Zanya, searchable with Tsukage, stuff like that. So I think it's one of those cards I'm not sure where I stand on it yet. And hopefully by the time that we do the video, I guess this is a good part of the fight video getting delayed. Hopefully by the time we do the fight video, I'll have a better feeling about Shiden overall, because I haven't felt the need to use it. Like as soon as I took it out of my deck, I never really was like missing Shiden or anything. But these other lists that are topping are both using Shiden. And so it's something that I get it, especially in faster games. So like the WGP list was not playing past like turn 5 or so, like their turn 5, and so deck out wasn't really a factor in that, and you'd probably rather have more cards in hand. Yeah, so I guess it depends on what sort of games you end up playing, but I've just found myself decking, because there's a lot in this deck. We've already seen Tsukage that's thinning 2 every turn. We've already seen Shinobi Scrolls that's drawing you an extra card every turn. Or not every turn, but whenever you use it. The grade 2 gets you another card. There's going to be more cards later that get you more cards from deck. So it's weird. And I think there's got to be a balance somewhere. I'm just not sure if that balance includes Shiden for me yet. Okay, so something I was kind of surprised that they actually included was SDs of most of the buddies. There's Drum SD, there's Jack SD, and now Tsukage SD, which I guess if you're going to pick a card to be a grade 1 in Katana World, if you're making the main attack is grade 2. Yeah, sure, it makes sense. This card is so useful. It gets you your Byakuya SDs for recursion and early rush, and it means that this card alone and 1 gauge gets you everything you need for a Gojin Maru. So you're not really losing 2 because you did 1 to get another one, so it's like sort of you're losing only 1. Maybe I should have talked about this one before Tsukikage, but this is the card that Tsukikage SD revives, Byakuya SD. It's really simple. So all it does is if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, it gets 5k, but because of Tsukikage SD, it means that it's a great ditch target. It's a great target to put into your gauge if you can pay the gauge later. It's also nice to thin with Hades Fall. So this is essentially like, you want this card in your opening hand, you want it in your drop, you want to just have it because of the value that Tsukikage SD brings to it. And yeah, a 13k boost is not bad, especially when I was saying before, the numbers in this deck aren't the greatest, so yeah, not bad. Let's talk about Sentinels. So pretty unanimously, my list, WGP list, Buddy Cup list, and most lists of this deck that I've seen are playing 2 Hayate and 2 Body Replacement. These are both Sentinels. This one is the classic D series, if you have only 1 card in hand, you don't have to discard. But this one is our special Body Fight one, so it's a Blitz order, which I probably should have mentioned before. Zanya does say that you can play 2 Blitz orders a turn, so that's very important to note. But yeah, this one is a Blitz order. You still pay the same cost, discard a card from your hand, but once you activate it, you can grab a ninja back from your drop to your hand and then remove this card. So it is a bit of salvage, which is really nice, because if you're using that skill, and let's say you are salvaging a Tsukikage, let me get a fancy one out. That means that when you use Zanya's skill next turn, you can get something other than Tsukikage from your drop zone. So it essentially gets you this, which is going to get you 2 cards, and then Zanya is going to get you a ninja and ninja arts. So it's putting you slightly ahead, like you get effectively 1 more piece. Or if you need to, like if you have 2 of this in hand, and only 1 other card, you can use its skill and then grab back a ninja, and then you have 2 cards in hand, so you can PG with the other one. Now the reason for the split is because we do play other Blitz orders. It is very associated with Katana World and Vanguard. So even though we can play 2 Blitz orders a turn, it's safest not to play too many of Body Replacement. Hayate as well, it hasn't come up for me, but you can call it down to Rearguard. Whereas, yeah, obviously orders you cannot. But yeah, having 2-2 split also means that you can play 2 Blitz orders in a turn and then also have another PG. So it's quite needed in some matchups, which I might talk about later when we get to the other cards. Okay, so we're going to start with the easiest of the triggers, 4 heals. Heals are heals, and this is the only heal that Katana World has access to. Or, I mean, technically the vanilla ones that you can call down, I guess. But yeah, there's like pretty unanimously, you just play this. Now, Katana World is, like I said, sometimes the numbers can be a bit iffy, and so fronts are really good. But more importantly, the front with the extra shield is really good. So I agree with the WGP list playing 4 of these. The Buddy Cup list was playing 3 of these, which, yeah, they had their other fronts as the Soul front, which I think in Buddy Cup is kind of not necessarily needed because your Soul Blast is your Vanguard. You get 1 turn. So starting from grade 3, you use 1 Soul Blast a turn. Your grade 0 doesn't stay in your soul, so you have a grade 1 and a grade 2 in your soul. So you have your first grade 3 turn and your second grade 3 turn. And if you haven't seen a Persona Ride by then you're going to need the soul fronts. But I found that if you haven't found a Persona Ride by then, you're sort of screwed anyway. Your gauge is still manageable. So I personally think that the soul fronts are not really needed. It's sort of like planning for breaking, which is not what I personally prefer. Now I'm going to bring up here as well that both the WGP list and the Buddy Cup list were playing more than 4 fronts. And while the Buddy Cup list I just explained about the soul fronts, the WGP list was playing this front. It's difficult because crits are strong, and your opponent going to higher damage means that they can't check as many defensives, if any at all. So crits are strong, but fronts are consistent because as well, you should be getting a front row out in most matchups pretty early. This one specifically was really useful. There was a game on stream against Prison where the Prison player committed a Muna on turn 1, and because it was before it had any protection, because there was nothing in Prison yet, it was turn 1, the Katana World player was able to snipe it using this front, which, yeah, that's a cool tech. And I think that if you are playing more than 4 fronts, this is probably the one to go for. Okay, so now 4 crits. This is actually a very good card. So a few things to note. One, it is Ninja Arts, which means that you can grab it off of Zarya. And also you can put it into Shinobi Scrolls and play it from there. So again, it was also seen on stream in WGP actually, but your rear guards that are swinging are both base 10k power, and Steel Ball adds 3k, so it makes it a magic number on both of the swings, and that can make the difference sometimes. Like, if you are able to sacrifice a 15k shield for an extra 10k shield from your opponent, I mean, that's all you need sometimes. And then yeah, because it is salvageable, even if you don't use it, you can grab it back just for a 15k shield, usually if there's nothing else. But yeah, this card is super good, and it's hard because if you're playing more fronts, you have less space for crits, but I think having it at 4 is very strong for consistency's sake. If you are playing more than 4 crits though, Ultimate Buddy, that is the choice to go with. This can give your Byakuya's Soul Guard, which especially if you're putting in Tsukikage SDs, that can be pretty useful. It will use your order for turn, and this one is not salvageable off of Zarya, and you can't use it with Shinobi Scrolls, but it's so rare that all of that comes up that I think you're more likely to want Soul Guard on your Byakuya than you are to want a vanilla crit that you can salvage. But that's only if you are playing more than 4 crits, which it's looking like 4 Steel Ball might be the way forward. This is also where I'm going to mention a tech that the Buddy Cup player used, which was 1 Minawagakushi. This has some application, and I see what they were doing with it, so I'm going to go over the benefits first. This card says that you can bounce one of any player's rear guards, so specifically against Azita Haka, that card's skill only activates when you take damage or when it's retired. So bouncing means that it won't proc, and they also don't get any shields well from it, so you're denying them their sword and you're not helping them get anything back from it as well. The other use for it is with Shiden. So Shiden, when this unit is placed on rear guard, so you can use it, Shiden, use skill, pay gauge, ditch 1, draw 2, and then use this, bounce Shiden back, call Shiden out again, do the skill again. So it does have some uses, but I think that the downsides are quite, it's hard to justify, I think, in my opinion. In matchups where the bounce doesn't matter against your opponent, it basically means it's just, you can bounce your Shiden back. I think playing more than one, super risky of deck out, and also you are sacrificing essentially 10k shield because it's a 5k shield when you call it to Guardian Circle. And it's just, more than one I think is too hard to justify, but even at 1 I personally don't like it, but I understand the use of it, and it's definitely something to consider as well. It's not necessarily bad. I mean, the person like topped with it, so you can't be like awful or whatever, but I just feel like it's a bit too gimmicky. And even though it is a ninja art, so you can grab it off of your top 5 with Zarya grade 2, and you can bounce it back with your Zarya grade 3, but also keep in mind that doing this means you're using your order for turn, so you won't be able to use things like Cup or Whirlwind, which we'll get to, or Hades Fall, things like that. So I just think that the downsides are slightly too much. If this skill was on a front trigger, that would have been pretty solid, but we have what we have. Now, let's go to the OT. So again, this one's pretty unanimous. My list, WGP list, and Buddy Cup list were all playing Blue OT. I mentioned at the start that when Gojumaru was a buddy of choice, those lists were playing the Buddy Fight OT because it gives your Vanguard and your rear guard a crit. But I think in the end, the consistency of Tsukikage is preferred, and so Blue OT is the way forward. Red OT is also something that can be considered because it is an extra attack, but the way that this deck works, because your Vanguard is usually your smallest swing, and you have rear guards that stop your opponent from intercepting, that sort of attack pattern encourages your opponent to hard guard your Vanguard. And because of that, it means that the Blue OT is more rewarding than the Red OT usually, because you get your 2 damage instantly, you've broken through their guard, and they were probably saving their PGs for your rear guards anyway, because those were the bigger numbers. And so Blue OT, pretty good. I found it to be the most useful OT in my testing. But yeah, obviously you can't use a Buddy Fight OT with Tsukikage as he retires himself when he calls himself, so a bit of anti-synergy there. As I said before, crits are strong, and because we're playing a lower crit count, having the extra crit is nice, and it lets you recycle pieces that you otherwise can't. So Zanya only recycles a ninja without sentinel and a ninja art, which is obviously really good, but Zanya himself, that's not a ninja, and then obviously has sentinel, and surprisingly a decent amount of the triggers are not ninja arts. Well, I guess not so surprisingly for the generics, but the heal, they for some reason went with a heal that was after BUDDYFIGHT 100, even though that's what they're saying, but that's whatever. Item blasting was right there, that's all I'm saying. It's green. But yeah, so the grab one back and drop is actually pretty helpful as well. Let's go on to our orders. So the card that was so difficult to get in the actual game of BUDDYFIGHT that now it's just a triple rare in a set. If only we could have had it like that back in the day. But this card is actually insane because it is 1-to-1 same wording as its BUDDYFIGHT skill. So 3 to 4 of this card is generally the most agreed upon amount. I prefer 4 because the games where I don't see it feel so bad, as opposed to the games where I have too many. I don't care, like having too many of it is really fine. I just think it's too important to see, like you have to be seeing it. And then again, because it's a ninja arts, you can recycle it. It is worth noting though that there are 3 cards in this deck, 3 different cards. We'll get to this one, that have a cost of discard. This does not proc off costs. So the only things that Whirlwind will, its discard effect, I guess, will activate from are Tsukikage's second skill, so the one that's never used. Shiden, obviously, was designed for, and Byakuya's restand. Also, very worth mentioning, its order skill to grab a ninja can be so helpful because at most now, if you're including this, you have a Tsukikage in hand that you grab back off body replacement. This is 1 ninja, Tsukikage gets you another 2, Zanya gets you a ninja and a ninja arts, so this is the ninja art you get. So all of a sudden you have 4 ninjas that you get back, which is just, yeah, really good, especially if you're fighting something that retires your board, or if you want to like reassign your Tsukikage SDs or something like that. So very useful skills. Okay, and I said we get to it, I meant now. So actually a little lore about me. Kanahebi Ninjas, which is this guy, was my first BUDDYFIGHT deck, so I love this card. And another little fun BUDDYFIGHT fact is that this card is not Snake Gaze. This card is Shadow Stitching, and they just put it on Snake Gaze, I guess because Snake Gaze, if it had the actual skill, would be a bit too broken in Vanguard. But this skill, very strong still. In Buddy Cup, I think mandatory 4 of, because every single BUDDYFIGHT deck restands their regards, and so this is denying that. As for regular format, I think all of the top decks right now, like Haru, Minerva, a bunch of them are all restanding their regards, and so very good to have. This is the card that I was saying, sometimes you want to use 2 Blitz orders and then also have a PG, so that's why we have normal unit PGs. But yeah, its strengths pretty much speak for itself. 15k shield and then you ditch 1 to stop something from restanding is huge. You can turn decks, you can shut them down entirely. So okay, so when I saw the WGP list, the thing I was most surprised by was that they were only playing 1 Snake Gaze, which, I mean, it is fine at 1, obviously. You can bounce every turn, so it's not going to be just used once. But yeah, like I said, a lot of the top decks right now in Japanese format are restanding their regards, and so I think it's fine at 1. Maybe it depends on your local meta, and obviously they were doing something right, so one's fair enough. And I did have it at 1 in my pre-release build when it was all proxied up, and it did work, but I think 1 is just, it feels risky. It's the same problem with Whirlwind. It's like, when you don't see it, you need it so badly. And yeah, for any deck that restands a regard, yeah, you need to see it pretty badly. Although it is worth noting, if you fight something that doesn't restand regards, it's still a 15k shield, which is nice. Both the WGP list and the Buddy Cup list were playing Sword, Skill, Bare Hand, Intercept. So this is another 15k blitz order, but it lets you draw a card if the unit attacking was your opponent's Vanguard. It makes sense because Snake Gaze is not useful in every matchup. There are some matchups where like it's a Vanguard restand or they're calling new regards, not restanding their regards. And so in those matchups, this one's nice to have. And I think even at 1, it makes sense. Okay, so now the last card in my deck is 3 Hades Fall. So this is another card. I've seen a topping list play none, I've seen a topping list play 1, I've seen a topping list play 2, and I've seen a topping list play 3, and I've seen a topping list play 4. So there's some variants with this. The Buddy Cup list was playing 3. I was originally playing 4, and then I swapped the 4th one out for another Tsukikage main deck. And the WGP list was playing 2. And honestly, I think 2 might be the way. So with my testing, even against other Buddy Fight decks, 4 definitely feels too many. 3 can be a bit clunky sometimes. 1 feels too low. But 2, I feel like 2 is pretty solid, because even now when I have 3, in games where I do see all 3, I'm usually discarding 1 anyway. I think 2 is a very sweet spot, and it does have some nice synergy with other cards as well. Like I mentioned before, you want Byakuya SD in your drop zone. There you go, there's your Byakuya SD. It is important to note that this card does not say the word choose, and so it gets around things that cannot be chosen. So most importantly, Bearlord. Also in Buddy Cup specifically, or I guess just Magic World, their grade 3 Ismoto that deals themselves for damage if it leaves the field doesn't have any protection during their own turn, and doesn't have Soul Guard. So this card against Magic World is essentially free damage if they Buddy Call, which, yeah. Overall, it's a really strong card, and I think the amount of variants that it's seen throughout multiple lists is really interesting. I remember talking to someone before Buddy Fight was out, they were saying like, oh yeah, it's either you play 0 or you play 4. And we've seen like so many different options now. The downsides of this card, there are 2. So the first is that it can only pick cards from your deck. So if you run out of a certain grade in your deck, which can happen, especially with grade 3s, then you just can't have that target. So that's unfortunate. And the other downside is that if you fight a weird deck that has, for example, a grade 4 like Azida Haka, you don't have grade 4s in your deck. So you won't be able to proc against that, which, oh well. Even against those decks that do like call grade 4s or non-grade 0, 1, 2, 3 to rear guard, usually they still will have a rear guard that's one of those grades, so it's not useless in those matchups either. It's also really worth noting that the Buddy Cup list was playing Fire Regardless because it synergizes well with this card. So this card, you can choose Fire Regardless, and then the opponent calls grade 3, put it into drop zone, and now you're Fire Regardless in your drop zone ready to activate. I personally don't like Fire Regardless as the Regardless piece for this deck. As I said before, Persona Ride is super important. Yeah, so playing Fire Regardless means you're 1 less Persona Ride, but it does have synergy and it is a really cool tech. So I guess if you're just that guy and you draw all your personas every time, then yeah, it can be nice as well. But speaking of the Buddy Cup list, there were 2 cards that I haven't mentioned yet that I've also seen in other topping lists, so I want to talk about them really quick. So the first is our indirect support thanks to 100 Demons. Again, synergy with Hades Fall, because this is another order that activates from drop. It's sort of filling the same purpose as Shiden, like it's plussing new cards for a gauge, so similar purpose there. But the downsides, first, I'm going to mention every time, deck out. Second, this is not a ninja art, so you can't get it back. Not that it matters because it does bind itself, but like when you're searching deck for ninja art off the top 5 from your grade 2 ride line, you can't grab this, but again, Hades Fall solves that, so that one's not really a downside. And you also have to be on 3 or more damage to get most of the skill out of this card that you can, which is a draw 2, and especially if it's going to be like a rushing sort of format, you end up at 3 damage before you get to grade 3. Yeah, pretty useful. I personally just don't like it now because I think, yeah, I'm just really scared of deck out, and I prefer the consistency of having more ninja arts and then using Hades Fall to mill my Byakuyas if I'm choosing grade 1. So it is useful, it does have its uses. Also, the thing is that this card, if you don't see it and you have to Hades Fall for it, then it becomes worse with each less Hades Fall you play. So you're playing 4 Hades Fall, you're probably going to guarantee this. You play 3, usually you'll see it. You play 2, all of a sudden it's like, I only get 2 Hades Fall a game. I don't know if I want to spend it on this. The other card they were playing that I want to talk about, Secret Arts, Dance of the Guardian Swords. It frustrates me every time I see a list playing this, because you cannot use the skill because it needs you to be armed with an item. And even if you could, the skill costs 4 gauge. That's more than your impact that you don't play. And yet I still see so many lists playing it. I mentioned before, if you're playing a second crit, I think Ultimate Buddy is the way to go, if I can find it. Yep, Ultimate Buddy, that's my choice for a second crit, because at least this one, you can use the skill. But if you really don't want to play Ultimate Buddy, I still think that the nationless 5k power, 15k shield crits are a better choice, because there has been a game in all of my testing so far, one entire game where I would have rather have called down a trigger rather than have it in hand. And so there is one use that I've found that this one cannot fulfill. This one, on the other hand, is a ninja art, so salvageable and everything, but I don't think that that saves it enough to be better than a vanilla crit. So, and also if you need the 15k shield, you can grab Steel Ball anyway. That one's also a ninja art. And now a card that I think if you don't play this deck, it's so common that people have asked me why I'm not playing this. But this impact sucks, man. I think out of the 4 impacts in the game, this is the worst one. First of all, 3 gauge is not necessarily easy and usually will require you to charge and draw past your grade 3 turn. And that's some deck out stuff right there. Usually on your first grade 3 turn, you'll end with 0 or 1 gauge. And so this card essentially becomes a turn 4 play, and that's just too slow. Then even after all of that, all it does is negate a non-heal, non-over trigger. So it's so much effort for something that technically might not even happen. If you use this and then set like a crit, for example, and then your opponent doesn't check a crit for the rest of the game, does nothing for 3 gauge. The other thing as well is because this can grab from deck or drop, it means that either you have to deck thin yourself 1 trigger, which is not what you want to be checking your triggers, or you have to put 1 from your drop zone, in which case your opponent will know because they're allowed to ask when you activate it, they're allowed to ask to look at your drop zone, and then they're allowed to look at your drop zone after you've put a card in. So they'll be able to know what trigger you put in. So it's really just not worth it. That's it for this video though. That's my long rant on Zanya. Thank you for whoever stuck around, and keep an eye out for the fight, and hopefully we'll see how my thoughts, I guess, develop on this deck. And I'm just super excited that it's back in Vanguard. Yeah, thank you.